Recording in progress.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Gestalt Get-Together, your speech therapy PD podcast for discussing Gestalt language processing, echolalia, special interests, music, and play. My name is Corinne Zmoos, and I'm a speech language pathologist who loves working with GLPs and talking to people about GLPs. Now, before we get started, it is very important for me to share my financial disclosures. I am the owner of Crescendo Communication, which is my private practice in Baltimore, Maryland. I offer coaching and consultation. I'm a paid speaker, and I do receive compensation for episodes of the Gestalt Get-Together. In tonight's episode, I'm looking forward to talking about the importance of coaching educators and paraprofessionals about their GLP students. In this episode with my guests, we're going to discuss ways to approach conversations about echolalia, how to share knowledge about GLPs, the knowledge, the techniques, and about that child in front of you, as well as methods for tracking and interpreting gestalts as a team. And we really want to emphasize the team part of that. So, who is my guest tonight? Tonight, my guest is a speech language pathologist with over 25 years of experience, very impressive, working with young autistic children. After decades in the school setting, she saw how overwhelmed and under-supported preschool special educators often felt, and how hard it was to find meaningful, engaging resources for young autistic learners. So, in 2019, she founded Autism Little Learners. Today, she supports educators around the world with practical neurodiversity-affirming strategies that help move them from overwhelm to confidence. She hosts the annual Preschool Autism Summit, which has brought together more than 50,000 educators globally. And in just a couple of weeks, that'll be happening again. And I am so excited that I will be speaking at that summit about music, of course. And importantly, before I invite her on, I do want to say we are both speech therapists, but we are not your speech therapists for those caregivers who are listening. These are our clinical opinions, our perspectives, and what has worked for our caseloads, but we cannot make guarantees for your kid or for your caseload. We hope that you take what sounds relevant to you, try it out, and if you're a caregiver, please go to your speech language pathologist to get more information and modifications for your child. All right, after all that, I do want to say welcome to the podcast, Tara.
Hi, Corinne. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be great. This is a topic that people have been interested in hearing about because when we think about maybe working with a kid one-on-one, so many strategies can be helpful and effective. But then we move into a classroom, it is a whole different world. We need to be thinking differently about it.
Yeah, really, in the classroom, you have so many different kids, so many different adults, and bringing them all together to understand this topic is a challenge.
So, how did you come into the world of Gestalt language processing?
I came into it before it had a name. And so Carrie Ebert and I always like to joke that we started in the 1900s, started our careers in the 1900s. And so it was 1999, my very first year in the schools, very first time working with autistic kids. And it was at the elementary level. And I was K through 5. I ran a communication-based program. So I was essentially the special ed teacher and the speech language pathologist,
Mhm.
and call it honorary special ed teacher. But with that first group of kids, I had 4 kids, and right away it was like, okay, what is this thing that they call echolalia?
Mhm.
In grad school, undergrad and grad, we did not learn much about that. I think we had one class, one session of one class where they talked about autism. And
Mm.
back then, echolalia was a word we had heard, but it was very much one of those things where they're like, we need to stop echolalia. So that was my introduction.
Mhm. And then how has your understanding of it shifted over time, and where have you landed on it now?
Well, I think learning more and more about it probably in the last 8 years, really. I think with Alex Zakos talking from Meaningful Speech, bringing
Mhm.
it back to the forefront, that really brought it to much higher relevance than it ever was before. And I think a lot of us found ourselves going like, oh yeah, that, yep, I'm connecting the dots. That makes total sense for so many of my students that, yeah, they might have echolalia like we're used to hearing it, but um, she talked about like different levels and stages, and all of that was just so interesting. And I think a lot of us wanted to consume it all, but really, it's still new, a new term, um, kind of out publicly.
Yeah, I was saying earlier that just this morning I was teaching a music class, and it was funny because I noticed it was a new kid to me, and I noticed him examining speakers very closely. And in my head, I was like, I wonder if it's a GLP, because so many GLPs I know love tech and outlets and wires and speakers. And then after class, his mom told me he just got a diagnosis in April. His speech therapist thinks he's a Gestalt processor. And then she shared a little bit about like we didn't know about that. So it's still there's still that big ripple effect happening where we think about like Barry Prezant's work the 1980s, and then Marge Blanc publishing and talking about the stages, and then exactly what Alex did was translating it into a medium that could reach so many more people
Yeah.
from academia into like clinical readers, like therapists, and now anybody can access that information.
Yeah. And really bringing it down into usable, not only terms, how she explains it, but also, okay, what do we do? What
Mm-hmm.
do we do next? She had so many great video examples where people could really see their own child or their students in those, and it gave them direction. Because if you just hear about something and it's theory and you're like, yeah, that's great. I think that describes my student. But what do you do with it? What do you do
Mm-hmm.
with that information? That's the huge thing that she brought forward.
Yeah. And it's typically the first place I refer people. If I talk to a parent or talk to another therapist, I'll say, go check out this resource. And like this is not like a sponsored recommendation. I do have to note that it's just simply that we've found it to be beneficial. And it's typically where I tell people to go first.
Hmm.
Um, so I want to hear about some of your experiences, maybe some anecdotes in the school setting. When you think about some of the kids or the teachers or the classrooms you worked in, do any stand out?
Oh, there's so many, Corinne, that stand out over the years. But I remember being that new teacher, uh, running a classroom. So I'm not pulling out for therapy sessions. I've got this group of kids all day, and each of them obviously had different ways of communicating. And so we had some kids that had very few words and some that were echolalic all day long. And I learned quickly that if I said, "What is it?" and showed them something, they would say, "What is it?" back to
Mm-hmm.
me. And that is a Gestalt language processor. And so back then, it was kind of, there just wasn't as much training without the internet. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
it was trying to figure out what worked. And so it was really on the job training, boots on the ground, figuring it out. And so I would figure out, okay, there's this one student who he loves this book. It was Cookies Week, this little simple book called Cookies Week about a cat that gets into mischief. And I would read it to him over and over, and he'd bring it to me. And every day we'd read Cookies Week over and over. And pretty soon he had the whole book memorized, even though he wasn't conversing back and forth with novel language, but he
Mm-hmm.
could read or recite all of Cookies Week. And I had another student. I think this is where it can be confusing when you have students that present and look so differently, and they're all Gestalt language processors.
Yeah.
So I had one student who was completely non-speaking. I had never heard him talk, and even at home, his mom said, no, he doesn't, say cookie if he wants a cookie. He doesn't, um, he's not verbal to express himself.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a hand leader. He'd bring you by your hand to things. Well,
Yeah.
one day I had gotten this like swing that attached to the doorway in my classroom so kids could swing.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets in the swing and he starts swinging. You know where they're swinging so high, you're a little bit
Mm-hmm.
nervous.
Oh yeah.
And all of a sudden he sings, "Life is a highway. I'm gonna ride it all night long." He sings the entire Rascal Flatts song, and we're all just like our jaws on the ground. And I think that's where people get confused because that whole song is probably a gestalt for him. One big
Definitely.
chunk. He memorized it all, just like Willie in his Cookies Week book. And people get confused. Well, look, he can say all those words. Why can't he say it to ask for this or that? And
Mm-hmm.
Gestalt language processing answers that question.
Yep. That. That's the starting place. That
Hmm.
is a single unit that's been taken in. It's the totality of it. And then with the right support, then we can help break it down over time and get to
Yeah.
those single words. Exactly. Um, I want to talk a little bit about some of the barriers that might exist to supporting these kids in the classroom. Before we do that, I wanted to share a quote from a paper. So this is from 2022. It's called Repeating Purposefully, Empowering Educators with Functional Communication Models of Echolalia in Autism. And this is by Cohn et al. So it's kind of a long quote, but I think it's important. Quote, "It is classroom teachers and paraprofessional classroom assistants that generally spend the greatest amount of time across the course of the day with these children and are consequently the natural audience to a much higher quantity and wider variety of echolalia than any other professional. Teachers and paraprofessionals routinely provide rich communicative opportunities for their students and assist in expanding their verbal repertoires, yet they receive little to no training with regard to managing echolalia." End quote. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's absolute truth
Mhm.
bomb there. I, having run my own classroom for 25 years, having paraprofessionals with me, can 100% concur with the fact that they are with students all day. And they're the people that get the least amount of training in anything. And I would say it's very, very rare to have specific training about echolalia and what to do and what it is. Um, how it can be this like rich resource for figuring out kids, what they love, what they mean. And it makes me think of this little girl that I had in my class about 5 years ago. And she loved to sing songs. So they're all her gestalts. But to someone else that doesn't understand anything about echolalia or Gestalt language processing, they just like, she loves music, she loves songs. But one day she came over and she was going to sit down next to me and she fell off her chair. And she's like 3 years old, 3.5 years old. And she looked up and she goes, "We all fall down." And right away, like my heart is bursting. I'm like, oh my gosh, that
Yep.
was so meaningful in that moment. She didn't have the novel words to say, "Tara, I fell." But she was able to say, like, "Hey, look, I fell down in this piece of Ring Around the Rosie."
Yeah, she was able to match the context, likely
Yeah.
the emotion that she derived from a primary source, and then
Hmm.
apply it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Now, examples like that, I think where, our experience with Gestalt language processors, it's really quick to be able to make that connection.
Yeah.
But there's a term that I know Marge Blanc uses a lot, and a lot of us have adopted about detective work. So tell us about what that is.
Well, I love detective work, and I have someone on my team. Well, she's my best friend, and she's heard all these stories over the years of my students, but she works with me now at Autism Little Learners, and she's always saying, "Okay, we need to Scooby-Doo that." So in our company, it's a verb. And so I, in turn, tell people in my community, we need to be Scooby-Doo detectives. We need to do our Scooby-Dooing and figure it out. So if we have a student that is saying something over and over and it's maybe seems like nonsense, we need to be talking to each other, like those of us in the classroom, and more importantly, talking to parents. Because this isn't a gestalt, but it's a little story I shared with you beforehand. I had a former student who we still stay in touch. He's 35 years old, and I remember I was a brand new teacher, and his like second or third grade teacher came to me and she said, "He is writing Daniel with an N at the end." And I was like, okay. And I'm like thinking there must be something to it. Like, why would he put an N? Maybe his middle name, maybe whatever. And I started doing my little detective work, my Scooby-Doo detective work, because the teacher was kind of mad about it and was kind of
Hmm.
scolding him, and it didn't sit right with me. So I asked his mom, and she's like, "Oh, well, his brothers are Brian and Steven. Their names end with an N. His must need to also." And so, being a detective, asking parents, they usually have the answer. And so then I was able to explain to this teacher, please don't come down on him for this because it's the cutest freaking thing ever. He was so sweet, the meaning behind it. He wanted to be like his brothers.
And I think it also speaks to the the way that GLPs are drawn to patterns and the way that patterns can feel so exciting or rewarding to them of here's this potential pattern in how names are spelled. I want to follow that pattern
Yeah.
too and fill it in and make this it's almost like make it more cohesive.
Mhm.
And that's something I love to look out for too with GLPs is what are the patterns they're drawn to or making? I mean, we know rainbow order, of course. We know
Yeah.
ABC, of course, ABC, the planets. But sometimes if I'm hitting a sticking point, perhaps with a cognitive gestalt, I'll sometimes do the detective work of what kind of pattern might they be trying to construct right now? I might not see it, but is there an underlying pattern here that's trying to be replicated? And so that's a really cool example, kind of like the intersection of maybe a linguistic and language gestalt. I'm not sure, but maybe more of a cognitive gestalt of let me put that N on so it feels more cohesive. I love that example.
And now, as an adult, he just goes by Dan.
That's easier. Yep,
No,
exactly.
I'm like, now
Get that final N. Good.
you got it. You got it, buddy.
So sweet. I love that. Um, to bring in something else from that paper, I think it was really interesting. So they analyzed information across a couple studies that talked to teachers and paras. And what they did was they brought it down to three main themes for understanding echolalia. and then 4 main themes for professional practice. And I wanted to lay those out and see if it sparks any anecdotes for you or recommendations. So what they talked about, again, this is from the Repeating Purposefully. And those of you who are here live, the link is in the chat for you to access that paper. So the 3 considerations for understanding echolalia that they derived from this study. Number 1, the echolalic, which they used to refer to the participants. The echolalic expects a response. Not all the time, but that was what a lot of the teachers and paras talked about. Number 2, echolalia is often contextual. That's what we're referencing. And the 3rd consideration, echolalia occurs within a communicative context. Now, there's definitely exceptions to that. Some echolalia is very personal. Some of it might be like more reflexive, and some of it might be more so potentially like a motor loop. But those are 3 main considerations. There's an expectation of some sort of response, it's contextual, and then it occurs within a communicative context. Then they talked about 4 considerations for professional practice in this article. Number 1, echoes are often disguised or need some detective work. I'm always saying, like, let's look 2 levels deeper. What's happening 2 levels deeper? Sometimes it's 3 or 4. The second one is that changes to echoed utterances represent progress. Number 3, data collection, such as through audio recording, is key. And we're going to talk about some data collection too. And then the 4th one's my favorite, which is that echolalia should not be stopped.
Yes, that is so true, because living in a time, and I think still there are times, places, people who still think it should be stopped. But way back when I started teaching, it really was something that, in the off chance we went to a training, it was kind of like redirect, maybe it wasn't tell them to stop, but it was definitely redirect onto something more appropriate, quote unquote appropriate. And I love now how people are learning to see it for all of those things that you just described, meaningful. There's meaning behind a lot of it. Not everything, but definitely We All Fall Down had meaning. And I also liked what that article, what did it call it? They're wanting feedback.
Expecting a response.
A response. And that makes me think of this Willie, who is also an adult now. He was my very first autistic kindergartner. So he's just, but he always had this thing that he would say, and he still says it every time I see him. And he says, "What will happen if I cut Peter's hair?" And then he waits. And if you don't know him and you don't know the story, you're going to get it wrong. And sometimes he's like not very happy when you get it wrong, but he knows I know the answer. So he always asks me and my grown children. And so, what will happen if I cut Peter's hair? And the correct response is, it won't grow back, because Peter's a doll. So that's his go-to.
And having that response from you, what do you think that represents for him? What does that mean for him?
Well, I think for him, that and other past experiences that we've had, or even past gestalts that I've been involved with him, those are his go-tos for socially connecting with me when he sees me. So when he sees my daughter, he says, "What happened when Walt jumped up on you?" And Walt is his dog. And my daughter at the time was like 3, so she cried when this big, huge dog jumped up on her. So he'll say, "What happened when Walt jumped up on you?" And she's like, "I cried." And he's like, "It made you cry. It made you cry." And so he has, with each of us, me and my family, his question that he asks. And then he moves on. It's almost like this familiar beginning where he knows that he can ask me, I know the answer, and it like breaks the ice.
Kind of like small talk in a way. People, it's so funny when we're talking about echolalia and GLPs, and people maybe are critical of it or have a hard time understanding why would a client or a child start with something like that. And I think, okay, well, neurotypical people might be like, "Hi, how are you?" But you're not actually listening for how the person's doing. It's just a way of starting and initiating an interaction. And I think about one of my clients, it's similar, where we work together virtually. We start the call. There's no highs, there's no hellos, there's no how are you, because that's not meaningful to her.
No.
The call starts, and for a while she would go, "What's your Wi-Fi password?" And that was how we started every session. And it's transformed over time.
Yeah.
But it's this shared like form of conversation that it gets the conversation going, it sets the tone, and it's also very like deeply personal. Hi, hello, how are you is a little more detached, but referencing that memory, that is so personal.
Yeah. My former student, Dan, that I talked about, he actually messaged me today. And because we keep in touch, a lot of my former students, that first crew, we keep in touch and go have lunch and stuff. And he messaged me and he said, this is all the message said. Mr. Brown was crabby, wasn't he? And it was the fourth grade teacher back.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep. So a lot of those shared connections or experiences, or he always is, remember when I fell down the stairs at school? So just reminiscing about all that I find that happening a lot as kids that I had turn into adults. The things they remember,
Right.
wow.
And that's something you see a pattern of really incredible detailed memory. And that's something we can also lean into as well when we're thinking about language progress. Is I think about if potentially what could happen if a child or a student keeps bringing up some sort of memory or referencing something in a gestalt. It might be easy to say something like, "Oh, that's not on topic right now. That's not what we can talk about that later." But the likelihood that what they're saying in that moment might be relevant to what you're already doing. There might be a connection there that, again, 2 levels deeper, if you think and do that detective work, you might find that connection there.
Yeah, and you just don't know it on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just acknowledgement. So I think a lot of times I've had students who repeat it, and people will say, just, he keeps repeating that, just ignore him. And sometimes if you just repeat it back, sometimes they just need confirmation
Yep.
or to be heard. And sometimes even with some jargon, imitate, and you might know this like with music, see
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Sometimes just imitating it back in a playful way. They look at you like, whoa, you're speaking my language. I love this. It
Yeah.
gets, I don't know, it helps with the relationship. Unless
Thank
there's that doesn't like it, then don't do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And you'll know pretty quickly if that's the
Yeah.
case. Yeah. You'll get a look or a hand stopping you. Um, Thinking about that really feels like one of the first actionable things that I recommend to people, whether it's a parent or a teacher. And I'm wondering if it's the same for you in the classroom setting of acknowledge by imitating it back.
Yeah.
That's typically where I'll start people off.
hmm Yeah. I think both for things like echolalia, um, and also in play.
Yeah.
People think I do a lot with play, and they think, well, he's not playing with the car like he's supposed to. We need to get him to play with the car this way. And start with getting down there with your own car, your own set of materials. And
Yeah.
if he's spinning wheels, you do it. And like
Mm-hmm.
really check it out and see like what's he getting out of it? Like
Yeah.
this, okay, it might be really cool. But for him to see you're validating what he's doing. And and you can expand over time by just modeling and seeing what sticks. Like, oh, he might like that you modeled putting something down a ramp. And so I feel like that relates to, just because it's that tuning in with them, acknowledging them where they are before trying to work on something else or expand them.
Yeah. The joining is that first step.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a great place to build joint attention. And I think about, where I might have started early in my practice. I'm thinking about building joint attention was you pay attention to what I'm paying attention to.
hmm
But then figuring out with these kids, especially learning more about GLPs, it's reverse, right? I'm going to join what you're paying attention to, and then maybe we can meet there. I
Yeah.
love what you're talking about with joining in the play, speaking about mirroring. Mirroring is one of my favorite places to start. What mirroring also does, other than giving you some insight into why what they're doing is actually pretty cool, usually from a sensory perspective. I was making oobleck with my client before I came over here. So cornstarch and water. Have you ever done that before? And she was having a great time sensory, and she got really close down and watched it drip from her hands. And so, of course, I got down low too, and it was kind of meditative. So those little moments of let me see what she might be getting out of it. And that's actually going to make it easier for me to know what to model.
Mm-hmm.
Because instead of modeling what I think she might be functional, what is she noticing? What language might match that moment?
Yeah. One of the things that I read from the Hannon Center in
I
Canada
was just going to talk about Hannon. Yes.
is the OWL method. So
Yeah.
observe, is it wait or watch all of a sudden? No, observe, wait, because observe and watch are the same thing. Observe, wait, and listen. And I've talked to some of my members about this, and they've tried it, and they're like, this is so great because it gives you the permission to take. I think a lot of times we all feel like we've urgently got to make progress, and we have to data, we have to make this progress. But I urge you to take time to build a relationship first. First, regulation. Obviously, if someone's dysregulated, they're not going to learn anything. But if you are building that connection through mirroring, through meeting them where they're at, that's going to lay the foundation for everything. And that's going to make progress versus you like day one asking a bunch of questions going into that teacher quiz mode.
And I think about a lot of GLPs I've worked with when I'm thinking about patterns, especially if they've come from other therapy, other types of therapy or experiences where maybe it didn't go as well. There might be an anticipation of pressure, stress, or methods that are incongruent with what their sensory needs are or their learning style is.
Mm-hmm.
And so with kids like that, when they come out of my caseload, I think it's really important to do some of that owling. And those of you who are here live, I put a link in the chat for you to check out. There's a really nice PDF all about OWL from the Hannon Center. Taking that time to build relationship and build trust, that it lays the foundation for, hey, I actually want to take in information from this person.
Yeah.
I actually want to take in the stream of sounds that are coming out of their mouth, because maybe it does map symbolically to what I'm thinking about. Like, it opens up that door rather than you have to talk till you want to talk. And I say to families when I start working with them sometimes, like, I want to help your kid fall in love with language.
Yeah.
I want them to talk because they want to and because they have to. And so that the OWL is a really nice place to start building that trust.
I love that you know what it is, because not everybody does.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Well, I was going to reference Hannon. Well, Hannon was one of the turning points. I'm so grateful to my supervisor. It was my first year, and she signed me up for Hannon More Than Words. And I remember sitting there, because they told you, think about your most challenging client. And I had this little boy where I wanted to understand him so badly, and I just felt like I was failing. And I was sitting there, and I suddenly understood him. It was such a turning point for me with More Than Words. But they talked about contingent imitation and like kind of the mirroring. And they spoke about how when you contingently imitate over and over again and copy that child, then there can be this transformation into reciprocal imitation, where there's kind of this turning point where a child realizes or sees the value in, let me actually copy you and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
they start to seek you out too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're the safe person, the person, they just know. I had a student just in the couple years before I just left teaching, not even 3 years ago, or left the classroom, I should say. He was non-speaking and definitely a Gestalt learner in many ways, but he would immediately drop to the ground when there was any kind of perceived demand. He was real touchy with yeah, anything, any direction.
Yeah.
And so leaned into his dinosaurs, playing with the dinosaurs. And I think at one point he knew exactly where they were. So he'd come in the morning, he'd race over there and he'd want to like pull the bin off and take them all out, make a mess, but get his dinosaurs. And there were some adults sometimes that would be like, he can't go and do that every day. He can't every day go and just play dinosaurs right away. And I'm like, yeah, he can. Like, he loves it. And so I think he and I just, you can feel it. I can't even describe how it happened, but through relationship, we developed this connection. And he's a child too that wasn't using any gestures. And one day he he kind of made a noise, like a grunting noise. And I looked over and he was at the snack table and he had pulled up one of the little wooden chairs next to his and he patted it with his hand and looked at
Nice.
me. And I was
Yeah.
like, my bottom's not going to fit in there because it had sides,
Oh,
but
sure.
I
Yeah.
tried my best. I just sat in it like halfway and
Yep.
I'm sitting there with you. This was like the best day of my life.
I think you're speaking to the importance of special interests, which, like, I mean, I just
Oh, yeah.
feel like I say that every single episode, where special interests are such a window or a doorway into connection and trust,
Mm.
where by joining a kid there, building a relationship through the thing that makes them feel happy, safe, organized. I think about dinosaurs, that it's like, I think like categories, right? Where GLPs who love this category of dinosaurs, category of shape, category of sea creatures, this
Mhm.
categorical information, it's like a container of information with predictable contents. So you're joining them in this predictable set of items, and then you can engage with them more predictably. And now you're more predictable, which means
Yeah.
you might feel safer.
Yeah.
And then from that place of safety, predictability, joy, and special interest, then what you were speaking about before, gently building outward. I call them play stretches. And through these play stretches, you can add things in, you can modulate, you can mix sets of special interests. There's so much you can do when you start with dinosaurs. It's
Yeah.
not limited, it's not fixed.
Yeah. And an important thing to remember about that is we're not using dinosaurs to get them to do things. We're incorporating dinosaurs into the learning. So we're not saying, well, first you do this activity with me and then you get your dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay, you love dinosaurs. So we're going to be counting dinosaurs, or I'll be modeling it. We're going to be like everything will revolve around dinosaurs. And are you ready for a real extreme story about a deep interest that I started teaching?
There's nothing I want to hear more than that.
Okay. So I had twins in my class.
Yeah.
I didn't have a word for special interests or deep interests at the time. We just knew
Yeah.
they loved these. They loved country singers. And it was like, oh gosh, couldn't we just have dinosaurs? Like, how do I try to incorporate country singers into stuff?
Uh-huh.
So their mom had said they're twins, they're second grade, not potty trained, and their mom's desperate. Like, how can we teach them to use the bathroom? Like, diapers are costing so much. This is just
Yeah.
help. And it wasn't for lack of trying. We all tried all the methods that we knew. And
Yep.
I said, okay, I wonder if they saw country singers peeing in the potty. So I made a little book for them.
Yep.
And from the waist down, it was board maker pictures of peeing in the potty with the
Yep.
yellow going in. And then I went to Google Images and I printed and cut out country singers from the waist up and just glued them on the top.
Yep.
And so then we read the book. Oh, Willie Nelson pees in the potty. Now, this is in the 90s.
Yep.
Willie Nelson pees in the potty. Clint Black pees in the potty. Big and Rich pee in the potty. And I have never seen those two boys turn pages so fast and like go back and back and back and forth, back and forth. And they peed in the potty that day.
Yep. That's
That
it.
day. And their mom is like, I need a copy of that book because it is my new coffee table piece, talking piece.
Yeah.
And so then we're like, okay, whew, this worked. What else can we do? So then I cut out a whole bunch of Willie Nelsons and we taught math. Like, okay, can you give me two Willie Nelsons? One, two. Can you give me five Willie Nelsons? And then the OT and all of us at the time thought, oh, they're their muscles in their fingers are really not strong. They need more of those activities for fine motor because anytime we give them like a marker, they drop it.
Mhm.
So of course they're not tracing their name. Oh, I used dots from a marker and put
Yes. Yep.
WILLIE. Guess who could trace?
Yeah.
And reading. So it's
Amazing.
like incorporating it. It really can be their learning, their curriculum.
I love that example so much. It reminds me of, oh my God, so many different kids popped into my head. You reminded me of, I had a client who has a really, really beautiful relationship with dogs.
Hmm.
He sees the world through dogs. And over the years, the things we have used dogs to help with or incorporated, I do like that word better, are really hilarious. And it brought me back a couple of years where toothbrushing was
Mm.
really hard, which I feel like we see a lot for kids with, a lot of sensory, like heightened sensory sensitivities, things like that. Toothbrushing, there's no way.
Hard.
So I thought about how can dogs be a part of this? Of course, the obvious one is we brush a dog's teeth. We do virtual sessions. So on Canva, love Canva.
Yeah.
I'd put different breeds of dogs, we brushing their teeth. Didn't really land, right? He was still really nervous about it. So then I thought, all right, how can I get a little weirder? That's usually the question I ask. If like the obvious thing doesn't land, how can I make this a little weirder? So I found a picture of an open mouth with all the teeth visible, and I put a different breed of dog on each tooth. So then it's like, let's brush the Bernese Mountain Dog. Let's brush the pug. And that really landed for him because then he could pretend that he had a different dog on each tooth and brush it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's genius. I love it.
But I think it's a cool lens for any listeners to think about, or what is this thing that feels happy and safe and
Mhm.
predictable? And then what can be, I'm taking that word with me, and how can it be incorporated into these areas of life that might be more challenging, that might feel scary, that might not even be of any interest that they're not perceiving or attending to.
Mhm.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to get like silly or weird with it, because often that's the one that sticks and that's
Oh,
the one that lands.
always,
Yeah.
always. And then those are the things because they're emotional and fun and exciting.
Yeah.
When your students are 35 years old, they're going to say, "Remember when
Uh-huh.
we brushed the dog's teeth?" You know. So
Yeah.
it's funny because those are the things that stick. Anything really, really emotional and
Mm-hmm.
good or bad, I guess.
So, oh yeah, well, exactly, right? I think I hear from parents, they're like that they hate that the really rich language comes out in really hard
I
times,
know. I know.
right? Um, yeah, I remember when one of my clients would get hurt and he would go, you're okay," because that's what he heard in those hard moments. So I'll never forget that one.
Yeah,
But
and then they
yeah.
self-soothe that way. And then
Hmm.
people say like, "Why is he saying you're okay?" Like, "I'm fine,"
Yeah.
thinking he's talking to them.
Right. And it's mapped to what he heard from the person he was comforted by. And
Yeah.
so it's like, okay, let me take this template of comfort and say it to myself. It's smart, it's
Yeah.
savvy. It's just
Yeah.
you gotta look a little deeper.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about classrooms. Let's talk about teachers. Let's talk about paraprofessionals. What have you seen help and work in that team setting?
Yeah, I think a big thing is when you start just a notebook
Okay.
and have a page for whichever kids that are Gestalt language processors or you think, and you start writing down their gestalts or the things that you're noticing. Okay, he's always saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And someone else on the team might say, "Oh, yeah, that's because that's what his mom says to him." And so he's comforting himself, or he's asking for help because
Mm,
he heard something. And so I think sometimes one person on the team might be like, "Oh, yeah, I totally know what that is," where five others are like, "I have no idea what that means." So
mhm.
having that book where someone could go in and look at it and say, oh, even write a message. That means blah, blah, blah. And that's the part too, where send a picture of that notebook to parents and say, do you know what any of these mean? And that can be really helpful getting everyone on the same page. But also teaching directly in small little micro trainings, because we know that in the classroom, you do not get time to train your paraprofessionals. And if you
Mhm.
do, it's very short, or the district is running some training that you don't have control over. And so
Mhm.
usually it does not apply, right? So in the classroom, these little micro trainings. So like get one handout, like the OWL handout, or there could be handouts just about echolalia, Gestalt language processing, a one pager, and go over it really quick, give some examples, and it's just quick training right before the bus comes.
Mm.
Those are some good ways to get some of these examples in. And sometimes I'll do Instagram reels and tell people this would be a great reel to show and do a 45-second training to show how to do this. And so
Yeah.
when you're thinking Gestalt language processing, one thing I always love to share with people too, because they think, well, he's grammar is not good. He's not using the right pronouns.
Mhm.
And so it was in that example you gave, like, are you okay? Talking to everyone about, instead of correcting them, just modeling what they would typically say from their perspective. So if
Mhm.
he says, are you okay? You could say, oh, I'm hurt, or I'm sad, or I'm not okay. Um, if you want them to use I, because they're repeating back what they've heard and using it in the right moment. So I think it's very hard to explain the pronoun piece to people. It really
Yeah.
is. It's probably like the hardest piece about Gestalt language processing.
Right. Yeah. And I think like just explaining like pronouns switching in general, right? I'll often be like, okay, here's why. I'm I to me, but you're you to me,
Yeah.
and I'm you to you, and we're we to we, but they're we to that. Like pronouns
Yes.
are really tricky.
Yeah. So like you do not need to work on it with young kids.
Not yet.
Let it
Not
go.
yet.
You can model it, let
Yep.
it go.
Modeling from their perspective because
Yeah.
they're going to take that as a chunk
Yeah.
and yeah, model it the way that they could say it. But yeah, it's so common like for them to pick up on the questions we ask
Yeah.
or with that pronoun. Uh second pronoun, oh my gosh, words.
Yeah,
Second
I know.
person pronoun usage. Got it.
All like just whipped up trying to explain the pronoun piece with GLPs. It's that hard.
Right. But it's like just keep it simple, model from first
Yeah.
person. That's
Yeah.
where we start. Um, What are some common challenges or issues that come up in the classroom where people, teachers or paraprofessionals are like, this is really hard or I can't do this?
I think a really hard thing is kids who have or are scripting or doing, it could even be one word verbally. And it's like I hear a lot of people say, well, he's just like talking out or making so many sounds at group time, and it's
Mm,
really distracting, or stimming on his device over and over. And, we kind of talk about how, because some places will say, well, we just take the AAC device and turn it over.
mhm,
And I kind of talk about, well, it'd probably be better to try to teach a whisper than taking their voice away, because a speaking child, we cannot stop them from speaking. We're not going to go
mhm.
put duct tape over their mouth. And that's essentially what is happening when you turn that over. So I think that is really hard. Like when vocalizations get loud, when scripting, stimming, those kind of things, I think that can be hard for people in the classroom.
Do you feel like, because I'm thinking about AAC programming for GLPs, being able to program gestalts or potential gestalts on there, do you feel like is that something that you've recommended in the past to help a GLP access their device like more successfully by programming recordings or clips on there rather than just the single words?
Yeah, I think for me, I think whatever gets a child using, like, I don't have data on that or
Yeah.
research on that in particular, but whatever gets a child communicating, and if that is it, I think that's great. I think teachers who are in a classroom with lots of kids,
Mhm.
that's where the noise part goes, but
Yeah.
it happens in any classroom with
Yeah.
speaking kids. There's lots of chatter. So I think, just talking about the classroom in particular, that was one thing I thought. But yeah, I'm all for anything in the AAC device that gets kids interested in it.
I think where the connection may be, because I'm wondering about if there are things programmed on there that are referencing like actual gestalts that the child is using or are connected to like curriculum or circle time, then maybe it would be like easier for a teacher or a parent to get on board, because then it maybe isn't just, I'm thinking about because I think when I'm working with teachers a lot, because curriculum is really important, following the curriculum, finding ways to connect in the curriculum with what can be communicated on the AAC device. That's
Yeah.
where I've gotten some buy-in to for teachers, because I used to work in early intervention and like up into the preschool ages, where just to get the AAC device out of the backpack, it's heartbreaking, right? Like it can live
Yeah.
in the backpack all day, helping to get them in on some of the programming decisions too,
Yeah.
for putting on potential gestalts that relate to curriculum, that relate to the daily routine. I've
Yes.
seen some buy-in there as well.
Yeah. That's great. And whether it's a gestalt that's programmed in or just a page that academically or
Mm-hmm.
socially relates to what you're doing,
Yeah.
because I think teachers, even SLPs, when you have a device that's newer or different and you don't know where things are in there, it can be really hard to take it out of the backpack, right? Because
Yeah.
they feel like, I don't even know what to do. I'm overwhelmed. But I think predictable routines help all of
Okay.
this in the
Yeah.
school. So I talk a lot about predictable routines, and I got to go see in action. One of my members lives in Canada, and she has a classroom with 6 autistic kids. And I went about a month ago, and watching them in action, they had so many predictable routines. And then,
Mm-hmm.
they'd whether they were in a group and they're doing calendar time, and all of a sudden every child has like a calendar page pulled up, and some kids are on their own following along, like, yeah, it's the second, and some kids are rocking and the adult is modeling, coming in behind them and modeling, and it was just very coordinated,
Yeah.
but not rigid, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone went out of that page, it's fine. We'll navigate back when we have a moment. But really well thought out programs have that predictability where
Mm-hmm.
kids are like, oh, this is our routine. The kind of thing where, like, in my classroom, I would turn off the lights, and that would be kind of our indicator that it was going to be group time. We're going to do circle time. And all of a sudden, kids would start coming over. And a couple of times we'd have like a substitute para or something, and we had told them, like, okay, here's our visual schedules. Kids come and get their picture. And so the child would make it all the way to group time. And then they'd be like, nope, go back and get your picture. And I'm like, oh, you're missing the point. Like, they just totally did what the schedule is there to support with, but they did it without. So we're good. But I think predictable routines make that happen, and it helps with becoming independent. I don't know if that is like way off tangent or if that.
I think it's all connected. No, it's because we keep coming back to what are ways of interpreting what we're seeing? What are
Mhm.
ways of helping in these complex settings? Managing a classroom is no joke.
No,
No
it is
joke.
no joke.
And so even something that seems small, like I turn the lights off to indicate a transition, someone listening might think, oh, I can use that,
Yeah,
because it's more than language too. It's what are some multisensory cues for the passage of time? What are multisensory cues indicating what's going to come next?
yeah,
And I think about sometimes with I mean, I'm always thinking about language, right? But sometimes the language is too much load. There's too much there. What if it's just the visual cue of the light changing too?
Yeah. We used to have for us up in our classroom, we had these letters on the wall and it said, "Stop talking." And it was for us.
Yep.
Stop talking.
Silence is so powerful. And that's another thing I'll joke about with families where I say, my job is all about talking, but these first few sessions, it's going to be all about not talking. And we're going to
Yeah.
see the power of that. I think
And I
about
think
when,
that,
yeah,
oh, I was going to say, I think
yeah,
that is a really great tip that I learned. I think it was Serena from Play Spark had posted a
yeah.
reel at
Okay.
one point that said, and this was, I was still in the classroom, and it said, "I'm challenging you all to your next session or the next, work time you have with a student. Do not ask any questions."
Yep.
Okay. So I had a student for like 10 minutes and I was like, mm, okay.
Hmm.
Oh, oh, I was about to ask a question again. Then and she's like, "It's not that you don't have to, you can't talk at all. Just don't ask a question."
Yeah.
And oh boy, that was a game changer because after going through that exercise, you realize how many questions you barrage kids with. You
Yeah.
go into that teacher quiz mode, and that's not fun to be hanging out with. Imagine if I came on here and I asked you 20 questions in a row. It's stressful. So it got me to narrate more. Like,
Yeah.
oh, that she's having the kid jump, the toy jump on the bed, jump, jump, jumping. And you just have to think. We have to think, okay, how do I narrate and not ask questions? But all people, all adults in the classroom can be doing that, and it's an easy switch.
Yeah. I used to love doing that when I had like the luxury of time to sit down with a teacher
Yeah.
or support staff. We had maybe 5 minutes. I say, "Do you want to do like a little activity? It might feel a little vulnerable." And what I do is say, "I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes and I'm going to keep track. I'm going to do tallies for how many questions and how many comments. And then I want and to see if they could like make a guess about what the ratio would be. And then I'd be keeping track of it. I'd have them, once the timer went off, say, like, what do you think the ratio was? And then they would be shocked
Yeah.
at the ratio of questions to comments. And it would bring so much awareness to it. And then watching that shift over time was really rewarding. And you'd see them go like, and they'd catch themselves and
Yeah.
look over. And also the pride that developed in
Yeah.
feeling that shift in themselves is
Yeah.
really cool to watch.
That's awesome.
Okay. Are there any other techniques or ideas when you think about speech therapists who are pushing into the classroom or maybe just have like 30 seconds at the end of a pullout? What do you think is important to share with teachers and paras?
Mm. I think it's really important to share that it's okay if you don't know what to do, right? It's okay if you're just learning about GLPs. You're not going to make a mistake or ruin anybody. And just to keep that open, that growth mindset, an open mind, and seek out, do the detective work, be curious. I think that's the biggest advice I would give.
When it comes to working with I'm thinking about like other therapists who might be in the school setting. So collaborating with OTs, PTs, maybe reading specialists. Is there anything that you've seen be effective in those collaborations?
Mm. Oh, I think like in particular in a music class,
Okay.
things like that, bringing in some visual supports can be really helpful just in general with
Okay.
kids to learn the predictable routine. And in turn, then you get more engagement and participation.
That makes me think about maybe how music teachers could be brought in with their skill set and their expertise, because so many Gestalt processors have that musical inclination
Mhm.
and are pulling from songs anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe a music teacher, if there are songs that the child's relating to, or could there be songs that are crafted or even written related to curriculum or related to transitions, that
Yes.
might be a resource for teachers of what are you noticing for this student in your time with them?
Mhm.
Are there lyrics we can pull that can relate to part the curriculum or the daily routine?
Yeah.
So that could,
And vice versa. If you are a
okay,
teacher in the classroom and you are seeing this kid loves this song or they're humming this out and I know it's this song, can we sing that as a group in music class too? And like bring his love for that there and show
oh,
the other
true.
kids. Like if he's non-speaking, so my student, he probably wouldn't have done it in a music class unless he was in a big swing in front of everyone.
Yeah.
But kind of showcasing like, hey, he can sing Life is a Highway, you know. Um, it can kind of have them teach a song or something like that.
I really like that. I'd never considered that, how that could be a really good connection point and a place for the student to feel really confident
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. Feeling confident and like a leader.
and like joined by other people. Because I think so much of what has to happen for these students is we're always figuring out how to pull them into what's already happening, pull
Yeah,
you in,
yeah,
but flipping that
yeah,
script and saying, let's invite or pull in all the other kids to
yeah,
what's happening for the GLP, what's important to them, right? If the music teacher is, if the goal, if the current point of the curriculum is maybe drum skills or rhythm, maybe the song that's used is not irrelevant, right? But could it be swapped out for something like Life is a Highway, where they're still
yeah,
working on eighth notes, but it's within the container
yeah,
of what that student really loves and feels good
yeah.
about.
And thinking of that, this didn't happen in music class, but one
Mm-hmm.
of my students way back when, he he's one that you would say, oh, he's not connecting socially with other kids and
Yeah.
he doesn't have joint attention, da da da. And I had an integrated play group with him. So it was him and three peers from his classroom. And we would go during recess time and we had a space, a play area, and we would learn to play with each other. We weren't teaching him to play typically. We were teaching other kids more about him and how to engage with him. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, he was like going on and on about moose, a moose. I don't know,
Yeah.
even remember why. So I'm like, okay, let's make up a song. We did like follow the leader. And whoever was in the front was the one that everyone had to copy. And then we made a song. And I still remember it. Do what the moose does. Moose, moose. And we would sing that. And then the moose in the front would stop and do something. And it was this
Mm-hmm.
predictable routine again. And so if he went, everyone did that. Well, of course, my son was in the group and he did a pretend. They laughed so hard in that game, he had the most referencing and engaging with his friends that I've ever seen. And he would still remember in his 30s, like the Moose song. And
Yeah.
it brought so much engagement between him and his peers and laughing. And it was music, predictable routine, but tapping into something that he liked about the Moose. And we just made up a song.
Yeah. And then they're joining them there. Um, I noticed I missed a question in the chat. I want to make sure we have a moment to
Oh,
get
yeah.
to. So Danny asked, a script has meaning, it's one that's repeated frequently, but when there's a script that is very long
Mhm.
and teachers report that it's really, it's difficult because the rest of the class is like listening to it, or
Yeah.
like the length of it is impacting other parts of the
Yeah.
routine. Any ideas or insights around that?
I think that's hard. It kind of what I was explaining about like the volume and the chatter and like if something's repetitively happening like that. But I have had luck with kids that are able to write, like, oh, let's go write it down. And we had so one student liked to say bad words. You know how that always
Yeah.
happens. They're full of emotion. And so we would just be like, okay, let's go. If he started saying a word, I'd be like, hey, should we go write it in the swear book? And he's like, Yeah. And
Oh,
we'd get it
interesting.
out and he could write. So it was like, you write it as many times as you want. That one was a little more urgent because of what the words were.
Yeah.
But he would go and he'd just write, write, write. It kind of, in a way, got it out of his system. So
Mm,
I don't know if that would work, but I know kids who maybe aren't spelling or writing yet. If I started writing and saying the words, the script, if I knew it, um, they would be like right there, super interested. And then give
yeah.
them the piece of paper and they might read it and hold it.
Yeah.
It's an idea. That's where I would
Yeah.
go.
I like it. It translates it into another modality.
Yeah.
And sometimes that translation process can kind of like scratch the itch there, get into a
Yeah.
place.
And then you can refer
Yeah.
to it. So if they start saying it,
Mm,
be like, oh, look, yeah, it's on there. Yeah.
yeah. Gives them a place to put it.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so unfortunately, we don't have time for the last two questions that came in, but I think those are good questions for those of you who didn't get answers to them. Feel free if you want to reach out to me on Instagram with those. You can find me at crescendo.communication and we can noodle through them together after this episode is complete. Tara, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk about some of our favorite topics this evening.
Thank you. I love being here.
Yeah, of course. And I just want to say for those of you who joined live, we want to make sure that you get credit for attending tonight. This course was 1 hour with no breaks, and it is available for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. If you're part of the ASHA registry and you want your CEUs reported, you must have your address in your profile, and then you have to go back onto your profile and make sure you do all the steps to complete, to indicate that you participated, you finished everything up. That way you're going to get credit, and that way you're not panicking in December to get all of your hours. Thank you so much to everyone who joined. We'll be back in a couple of weeks for another episode of the Gestalt Get-Together. And for those of you who are able to attend, we do have the summit coming up in a couple of weeks.